It all started on what was supposed to be a quiet Sunday morning. My wife had just gotten back from a long night shift and wanted nothing more than to catch up on sleep. We had just moved into this HOA-run neighborhood a few weeks ago, hoping for peace and some normalcy. But we had no idea that our biggest challenge wouldn't be unpacking boxes. It would be dealing with the woman across the street, the self-proclaimed watchdog of the entire neighborhood. Everyone just called her Karen, and it didn't take long to understand why. That morning, she marched up to our door, clipboard in hand, demanding my wife open up because she needed to speak with the resident about a violation. No knocking, no courtesy, just loud, aggressive banging. My wife, exhausted and in no mood for drama, simply didn't answer the door. That's when things took a turn. Karen stormed back across the street, grabbed her phone, and within minutes, police sirens were echoing down our street. She had called the cops on my wife for not opening the door. You'd think it was a hostage situation with how seriously she played it up. What Karen didn't know was that my wife wasn't just anyone. She wasn't just a new face in the neighborhood. She was the newly appointed police chief, and this was about to get real awkward, real fast. Watching Karen puff out her chest while trying to explain her emergency to the responding officers was something I'll never forget. And the moment they realized who my wife was, priceless. But trust me, it didn't end there. Because what my wife did next wasn't just unexpected, was a lesson Karen would never forget. And it's the reason the entire neighborhood still talks about what happened that day. You won't believe how it unfolded next. Now, before we get into what my wife did next, let me back up a little and give you the full picture. See, Karen wasn't just any neighbor. From the moment we moved in, she made it very clear that she ran this HOA like it was her own personal kingdom. She had a rule for everything: trash bins had to be out no earlier than 7:02 a.m. Grass cut exactly to regulation height, porch lights a certain brightness, and she enforced it with the energy of a full-time job. We'd only been here a few weeks, but we'd already gotten 3 warning letters taped to our door. One was because our car tires were touching the curb line. Now, my wife, let's call her Olivia, she's not the type to get rattled easily. Years of law enforcement, tough situations, high-pressure calls, none of that compared to Karen's HOA lectures. And when Olivia became the new police chief, she specifically asked to keep it quiet in the neighborhood. She wanted to just blend in, live peacefully, and not deal with the awkward "you're the chief" moments. Unfortunately, Karen didn't give her the chance. So when those officers pulled up in front of our house, Olivia calmly stepped outside in her casual clothes. Karen was already halfway through her dramatic retelling, claiming Olivia was hostile, uncooperative, and possibly hiding something. I stood back, watching the scene unfold, heart pounding, not because we were in trouble, but because I knew Karen was about to get hit with a reality check she'd never see coming. The officers looked a little confused. Karen kept talking. And Olivia, she stayed quiet, just waiting, letting it all play out. But behind that calm smile, I knew something was building. What Olivia did next wasn't angry or loud, but it shook the whole street. And Karen? She had no idea what was coming. One of the officers stepped aside and quietly asked Olivia for her name and ID. She calmly handed it over, and I could see his eyes widen slightly as he read it. He turned to his partner, whispered something, and suddenly their entire posture changed. But Karen didn't notice. She was too busy pointing at our house, ranting about how new neighbors need to be taught the rules. She even waved around her HOA badge like she had legal authority. Meanwhile, Olivia just stood there, arms crossed, not saying a word yet. It was like watching a slow-burning fuse inch toward the fireworks. What made things even more complicated was that this wasn't Karen's first time using the HOA to mess with people. We later found out she had a whole pattern targeting newcomers, especially those who didn't bow to her authority. A young couple down the street had gotten a fine for planting flowers outside the approved color scheme. Another neighbor told us she'd called animal control on their harmless golden retriever because it barked once during the day. Karen thrived on control, and this time, she thought she'd cornered another victim. Inside the house, our phones were buzzing. Word was already spreading somehow. People knew something was happening in front of our place. One neighbor even came out with his coffee just to watch the show. And the funny thing was, no one seemed surprised it was Karen stirring things up again. Everyone had a story about her, Kay, and most were just waiting for the day someone would finally put her in her place. But here's where things took a twist. As the officers started to step back and rethink how they were handling the situation, Karen doubled down. She accused Olivia of intimidating her by silence and said she felt threatened. That was when Olivia finally spoke in what she said next. Let's just say it shifted everything, and the fallout was only beginning. Olivia finally stepped forward, just enough to make eye contact with both officers. Her voice was calm, steady, and professional. Would you like me to call the precinct and clear things up, or would you prefer to do it? She asked the lead officer. There was a long pause. Karen's face twisted in confusion. Precinct, she repeated, looking from Olivia to the officer like she'd missed a line in a script. That was the moment things started to crack. The officers exchanged glances again. One of them pulled Karen aside, speaking in a lowered voice, but not so quiet we couldn't hear bits of it. You didn't mention she was law enforcement. Karen's head snapped back in surprise. She never said she was. She didn't even open the door. She hissed. How was I supposed to know? And there it was. That's all this had been about. Karen didn't get the response she wanted, so she escalated it, assuming she had full control of the situation. But now, the ground beneath her was shifting. You could see it in her eyes. This wasn't the reaction she expected. The air felt heavy with tension, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. That's when Olivia reached into her bag and slowly pulled out her badge. She didn't wave it around. She didn't make a scene. She simply held it up, said her full name and title, and handed it over. The silence that followed was thick. One of the officers straightened up immediately, his whole tone shifting to one of respect. The second one looked back toward Karen, like he was starting to understand just how far she had overstepped Karen, though wasn't ready to back down. She crossed her arms and said, "So what?" That doesn't change the fact that she broke HOA code by refusing to communicate. And with that, Olivia gave the smallest smile. Not sarcastic, not smug, just patient. Because the moment of truth was coming. And Karen had no clue what she'd just triggered. Just as the air started to thicken with tension, and the officers seemed ready to wrap things up, that's when the unexpected second twist hit. One of the neighbors, an older man named Mr. Denton, who rarely spoke to anyone, walked slowly up the sidewalk holding a folder. "I think you all might want to see this," he said, handing it directly to one of the officers. Karen's face immediately tightened. "That's not necessary, Robert," she snapped, her voice suddenly high and shaky. The officer opened the folder and began flipping through it, his eyebrows raised. "These are formal complaints against the HOA president," he asked, glancing at Karen. Mr. Denton nodded, "And most of them are from the past year. Abuse of power, harassment, unauthorized fines, you name it. None of them were ever addressed. We were told to drop them or face legal threats." Karen's jaw clenched, but she didn't say a word this time. Olivia stepped back, letting the situation unfold without a word. The power was shifting, not just between her and Karen, but in the entire neighborhood dynamic. You could see neighbors peeking through curtains, a few even stepping outside now. That things were clearly bigger than just a petty complaint. It wasn't just about Olivia being the new police chief anymore. It was about how long Karen had gotten away with controlling everyone. and how many people had stayed quiet out of fear of retaliation. But the most shocking part came next. As the officer continued reading, he paused on a highlighted section. "Is this true?" he asked Karen, holding the page up. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. That page contained something even we didn't know. Karen had allegedly filed false HOA citations against over a dozen homes and forged signatures from board members who had already resigned. Olivia looked at me for the first time since it all started. No words, just a knowing glance. This wasn't just a neighborhood drama anymore. It was officially something bigger. And it was all about to explode. The moment that final accusation hit the air about the forged signatures, everything stopped. Karen's lips parted like she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. One of the officers gently but firmly asked her to step aside while he made a call. The second officer approached Olivia and said, "We're going to need an official statement, Chief, and possibly your assistance." Olivia nodded, her expression still calm, but now with the authority that left no room for doubt. The neighbors, who'd gathered quietly by the sidewalks, watched in stunned silence as the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA was now being questioned by the very police. She had called. Karen tried one last time to save face. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. I didn't forge anything, those were approved." But her voice cracked, and everyone could see through the act. Mr. Denton calmly added, "The former board members have already submitted written statements. You've been running this HOA alone for months without legal standing." That's when the final twist dropped, as Olivia helped the officers sort the papers. One document caught her eye, an old HOA internal memo, signed by Karen. It stated that any law enforcement officers residing in the community must disclose their position to the HOA board within 30 days of moving in, a rule that clearly didn't exist in the public bylaws. "Interesting," Olivia muttered, holding it up. "So this was never about me not opening the door. You just didn't like that someone moved in who couldn't be bullied." Karen froze. That was it. She'd known from day one who Olivia wasn't. She wasn't trying to enforce rules. She was trying to push her out. The officers quietly escorted Karen to her house for further questioning, and the crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring in disbelief. Just when it seemed over, Olivia turned to me and said, "Check the mailbox when we get inside." Confused, I found an anonymous note. Just one line. Karen wasn't working alone. That note in the mailbox kept us both up that night. Whoever wrote it didn't sign their name, but it was clear Karen wasn't acting alone. Over the next few days, Olivia worked with the precinct and city code enforcement to review the HOA's recent actions. Turns out, 2 former board members had quietly let Karen take full control after resigning without informing the neighborhood. She'd been writing her own rules, pocketing small fines, and scaring off anyone who pushed back. But with Olivia now involved, everything changed fast. A special HOA meeting was called. The entire neighborhood showed up, and for the first time, people spoke openly. One by one, neighbors came forward with stories, some small, some serious. Karen didn't attend. She officially resigned the next morning. A temporary board was voted in, and guess who they asked to help guide the transition? Olivia declined any official role, but promised to keep an eye on things. Her message was simple: neighborhoods should feel safe, not controlled. That anonymous note, we never found out who wrote it, but maybe that's the point. Maybe it was just someone who finally felt brave enough to speak, knowing the silence had been broken. As for us, we finally found the peace we came here for. The lawn still isn't regulation height, and we still leave our trash bins out a little early. But no one complains anymore. If there's one thing to take from all this, it's that authority, without accountability, is dangerous even in something as small as a homeowners association. But when people stand up, when truth is louder than fear, change happens. Olivia didn't just shut Karen down, she reminded the whole block what leadership really looks like, and that's something this neighborhood won't forget.